Be hitting that live screen. What's up, guys?
What's up, man?
We have a fresh-faced youngster here with a fresh haircut. Haven't seen this hair rocking and rolling in quite some time.
It's time to
Chris,
go back to Stormblood.
Time to go back to Stormblood. It's been that long. So you've got a job that et cetera. So we're obviously going to have some content scheduling changes coming up here. Do you want to give an idea of what people can expect before we jump into today's show?
I don't really know what it does to the streaming side of things, like the total hours. So I've been doing some contract work over the last year as ad revenues become less predictable, to kind of supplement, and as sponsorships become like the three things that pay for a full-time content creator, just as like a brief overlay for anybody that hasn't paid attention to kind of this discussion, as Twitch talks about changing their rates and things like that. Like this conversation comes up regularly.
The Partner Plus program.
Yeah. So before you get it, so basically community support comes in, and that is one leg of the stool. Not all the legs are the same length, but the stool just has to get held up. Another leg is ad revenue. The internet is powered by ads. And so when people brag about an ad blocker, they brag about removing that leg of the stool. And ads are not something that we all necessarily enjoy, but it is a leg of the stool. And then the last leg is direct sponsorships. And that is companies stepping in instead of like the advertiser leg. They step in kind of like the community support leg. And that can be things like affiliate links, sponsored streams, and so on. Twitch is fine with you doing that as long as it's less than 3% of your total screen footage and things like that. So like there's some rules. So if you see me like having a little mark on there that just says 3%, I think I'm just going to start setting aside part of the screen. When I have a sponsorship, it'll be their logo, and I'm just going to have a 3% there when it's not. And we'll just that way I don't ever have to worry about, did I toggle it on or off? It's like, it's either brought to you by me or it's brought to you by somebody, but I'm just going to start having this stream is sponsored all the time because by the malicious 3%. Compliance is the safest compliance. So that's my view. Like, why risk it? It's just easier. So as two of those legs have become inconsistent, it puts a lot of pressure where I have to start like relying really heavily on the community support. And the community support absolutely makes things possible in my life, and I owe them an immense thank you. But it's I don't ever want to be at the point where I like suddenly lash out at the community and say people who just hang out and don't support me monetarily aren't welcome. That would be insane.
Who would do something like that? That would be
and I think it would just be a moment of weakness. I really do. But I don't ever want to have one of those moments. So I have been.
You want to maybe like stop streaming for a minute, like step away from the computer.
That would be best.
Maybe get the
that would be best
off the Twitter. Just like all right,
let's be best.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully, I don't have the visibility of other people because then a moment like that would result in like multiple videos being made, and it would be a whole thing. So I have found that like I can supplement that by doing contract work. And actually I found that to be more, at first I was like, well, I'll just do it because it makes the numbers add up. But I actually found that like I have a master's degree in architecture. I don't use it that much when playing Final Fantasy 14. And so like I've been doing contract work for an architecture firm, and like I found that actually really like doing it as a part of my life is really joyful, and I get to kind of stretch that part of my brain, and that feels really nice. And so like I've enjoyed some of the contract work I've done over the last year or so, as I've kind of picked up brief little stints. But I got an opportunity to do something a lot bigger and kind of command a little bit of a team, and the pay is substantially higher per hour. But it's going to pull. Mondays will start at noon, Tuesdays will start at 10, Wednesdays will start at 10. I'll be off Thursday, Fridays. So technically my stream schedule doesn't really have to reduce by that many hours, but I don't know what that does to me. And so like in all honesty, you ask like, what does it mean? Well, every Work to Game has had many chapters. August 8th is when we turn over a leaf to another year. I don't know as we approach the next August 8th. I don't know what the next chapter of Work to Game is. I have had a job where I worked 60 or 70 hours and Work to Game did exist. So like, it's not like I'm super concerned, but this is a lot less hours than that. This is, I think it's 36 hours a week. And some of those are on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's 36 hours a week. It's, it's more than I've been doing for the previous contract was capped at 20. And when they would assign me 20 hours worth of work, it never took me 20 hours. They just always said, this is the most hours you can use. And obviously, if you can do it in less, that's great. And so like, this is by far the biggest. And I went to say no, and like, it's really great people, and it's a chance to do something really cool. And, but it does mean the hair has to get cut and the stream schedule will change.
Yeah.
The plan is to maintain as many streams as possible through at least FanFest. That way, if nothing else, people who've chosen to support me monthly because they watch me monthly
Yeah.
have the chance to let their subs drop. I think that's more than fair. So I will do my best to maintain hours. I've done my best to be incredibly transparent about this process from interviews and stuff like that recently. So if there's anybody that's decided to put their support elsewhere, I hope we've made that very, very clear. And then that way going into August, hopefully I have a little more of a clear representation of what that looks like.
Right. Like, oh, if it ends up being just like a couple of days a week, I think that ends up being a little bit healthier, personally speaking, because I do see that from, and not just like with you, like you were always like way more talented in terms of like being able to talk and engage. So behind the scenes baseball, it's like, I remember I had this epic stream for the New World stuff. And I remember like, oh my gosh, like, hey, Chris, do you want to just come hang out with me a voice? Because I'm fading. I feel my energy just about to just like crater. Like, I don't know how anybody can do it for this many hours this long, but that's the talent that you've always brought. Now, you've described that also as a muscle that you use and you develop, and it makes complete sense. But then I think there's also this like mindset from a lot of people who want to jump into content creation that it's like, you got to be live for 12 hours a day. And it's like, oh man, like and I saw like MTash tweet this out and a couple other people, and it's kind of what you and I've always said. It's like, take off some of those hours and make sure you're investing it in YouTube, whether you're taking your stream and you're doing something with it, or
reading articles or learning how to better do your stream, or right. There's other work that happens off screen that doesn't ever make it on screen.
Correct.
When somebody comes in and references an article or references something that happened in another content creators community, it's best if you've already consumed that content. So there's an element of that that's very research based. That's a little different than consumption. So it's not like, oh, you just get to sit around and watch YouTube. I watch a lot of things at 1.5 times speed. I scrub things. I'm looking for Reddit links that ideally have timestamps and stuff, because you're trying to consume a very large amount very rapidly. So it's a lot closer to writing like a book report. So it's not as enjoyable as when I'm just surfing YouTube. It's more focused. When I'm just surfing YouTube, I end up, I lose 2 hours, and 45 minutes of that was learning about woodworking, which I'll never do. So like, it's much more focused. So yeah, there's a lot of elements to that I don't think the answer is just be live all of the hours that you can. And definitely it's something that's a muscle that's built. I think there are people that have an aptitude to it, just like anything else, just like running or whatever. But there's a reason you don't say like prodigy when somebody's in their 40s and 50s. Like, they're not a prodigy anymore. Like, it's there through work. The people who had an aptitude and the people who didn't, they've all caught up. Work ethic is the better measure over that length of time. If you want to become a better runner and you run 1 mile this week, and next week you increase that by 10%, and you do that every week, after a year, even if you struggled some weeks, you are at over 100 miles a week. So like small percentage gains repeatedly are how people get to any skill set. And that's true of streaming and stuff as well.
But same thing about withdrawing, same thing with anything. It's like, just keep at it. If you got a passion for it, don't let, the first no or the first, just keep plugging your away. And then eventually you're going to look back and you're going to be like, whatever it is.
Savage rating, playing guitar, whatever you want to do.
Keep it up.
It's
just keep
small compounding growth away.
So we got a lot we could talk about, because there's been a lot of developments. Obviously, we had Summer Games Fest, Xbox's show. The Final Fantasy 16 demo came out, and I got to sit down and play through that, and I'll be playing through that this next week. So I'm going to say dealer's choice as to, I just listed off a handful of topics. We could talk about a handful of other topics. What do you want to jump into first?
I mean, I don't understand how people have time to play this many games. Like people are so excited about it, and they're like, which showcase had the most games you want to play? And I'm like, how is the number of games you're adding to your existing games plural? Like, how do people look forward to more than one game at a time? Like, so were there any showcases that make you think you are going to drop existing games to make room?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And I think that really kind of ties into the first game that I'm honestly, from the showcases, that I'm more excited about anything, because it's also within reach. One of the things that I get when people talk about like, hey, we want to make sure we're seeding, 3 and 4 and 5 years down the road. Like, I don't have that kind of energy right now, because I think 2023 is like one of the best years for video games, at least for me. Like, we talked about Diablo, we talked about all these things. Like, it's checking all the boxes, in my opinion. That's why the internet discord around video games has gotten so like vitriol that it's just like, I don't know. I
Like, I
just
don't know why. Like,
right.
it's time of plenty. Like the
I'm
buffet has the best steak ever, and they
yeah.
just are. They're bringing in the lobster off the boat, and the chicken. People are complaining that it's too savory. Like it's too perfect. And there's a family using their family recipe to make Italian gelato in the corner, and like people are arguing with each other.
Mhm.
Why? Like, just go
Right.
get what you want to eat.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
what a great time to be a gamer.
All right, 1 second.
For anybody that wonders why I'm wearing a collar, I am flying today, and I'm flying again on Monday. And when to make this affordable on streamer salary, I buddy pass because my brother-in-law works for an airline, and so I can fly standby. But you're a representative of. They can see that you're a buddy pass, and so I am a representative of his. It would be best if I am polite, if I am in a collar, looking nice,
Looking sharp.
and as a result, if you're polite and stuff, and they see that you're a family member and you're polite and well dressed, I've also found that like. It's how I get to sit in first class when I don't belong there, and it's how I get the extra legroom seats when I don't belong there. So they don't just get you on the plane;
Yeah,
they'll distribute some of the upgrades to those people. So it's just kind of one of those internal things within the industry where they try to treat each other's family members with a little bit of extra respect. Every once in a while, I get like a drink coupon or an extra bag of pretzels or something. It's just a little nod,
little perk.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, ultimately, like, what did I see coming out of like Summer Games Fest and things that I'm excited about that I already haven't really shared? And I think for me, the biggest takeaway is Starfield, namely because obviously, like, the gameplay, I think, sells it to me. It's got that first person shooter, but at the same time, it's got that like exploration and RPG elements. Obviously, coming out of it, like you see the people frustrated with the 30 frames per second. I am one of those, especially on console, especially for a shooter. Chris and I have made our opinions on this very well known.
That's basically
I've seen a lot of people. Yeah,
it's
first
supposed to be
party,
Premier
hardware, the most powerful console ever, etc. Like, to the point where then on PC, it's going to be 60, if not more. Like, I have a PC that's going to run it. So just like with Redfall, like, I'm not negatively impacted by this, but it still is like, yeah, like, that's just like, this is an Xbox, series console forward, and they're not going to hit 60. And I've seen so many people coming out in defense of all of a sudden 30, like 60 frames doesn't matter. Why are we making a big deal about, the number of frames? It's going to do so many things. I'm like, all right, if you're happy with it, that's fine, whatever. But we know scientifically that the number of frames actually has a more enjoyable impact on players and the way they enjoy games.
Depends
But I'm not
on the game, right?
well,
Like a
yeah,
turn-based
like,
game, it is what
yeah.
it is. There's a reason that Diablo has the ability to let your frame rate suffer in cutscenes. Like, there are people that are okay with that. TV's at 24, or at least it used to be. These days, now we stream everything, and we're all getting 60 frames, 20 billion Ks. It's like, but the frames. In-house games, right? When they bought ZeniMax, in-house games should have Premier access. They should be able to pick up the phone and call the hardware team and say, "Hey, I'm having this issue. What's the deal?" They should be able to troubleshoot this. And in-house games, first party, the reason they should be exclusive, the only justification for things being exclusive, is that they are uniquely designed, spec'd, and perfected to showcase both the game and the hardware. They're supposed to complement each other. Wii Sports was only on the Wii because only the Wii could make Wii Sports possible, and Wii Sports made the Wii look better than ever. They were there to complement each other. So the exclusivity gave the community something. So if you are bringing something to bear that is going to be console exclusive, then there needs to be a silver lining, right? We're paying something. We're paying in exclusivity. We're paying in locking everybody that does not have that console out, and that sucks. And in trade, we as a total gamer community should be getting something back. It's why I'm against third-party exclusives just almost across
all the
the
time.
board. Because I don't see what we're getting. I see what we're paying. I don't see what we're getting. I see what they're getting because they're usually getting.
I see what they're getting.
Yeah, that doesn't help me. It's not like, well, because because Square Enix is buddied with Sony, all their games are only $40. That would be different.
Yeah, that'd be a different conversation.
It's the same thing. We're just getting the bad.
Well, especially when the PC version, like in this case, because obviously we're alluding to 16, which I got the collector's edition. Like, financially, like, I'm already sold. Like, there's no which way or but about it. But I still at the same time can say, yeah, I am looking forward to buying this again on the PC when it has the ultra wide support and PC features that can't be done on the PS5. And so I think ultimately they sold me twice. Like, well played, Square, but I do feel for especially a large part of the community. That's where when we talk about those who are like really frustrated, the biggest voice I hear is the exclusivity voice, because I'm not putting any weight into anybody who's like, it should be a turn-based game. It's like I like turn-based games. If they make a Final Fantasy that's a turn-based game, I will buy that too and be excited for that as well. But that isn't what Final Fantasy is. Final Fantasy isn't like one thing. But when it comes to PS5 exclusivity, I get it, because you're going to have to lock yourself into a box and not have it spoiled. And already, I like the fact is this thing's going to sell PS5s. And all I said was the other day, I hope that check from Sony was massive to Square, because this is finally of like a first PS5 forward game. They're not supporting the PS4, so we get to see what they can bring technologically and what they can benefit from the Sony team and the devs. Like you said, the hotline is up. The Sony team is there to help make sure that this game runs as best as it can on a PS5. And I think a lot of people are gonna, next week's gonna be wild. But in terms of like quitting other games or just like setting other games aside, Starfield looks to be such a meaty experience. But the 30 frames a second is like, that's just an instant. I'm not going to really bother with it on console. That means I'm going to play it on PC. And the best news out of all of that, it was this subtle line. And I don't know if you've even seen it. This is, for me, was huge. PC Game Pass is actually coming to GeForce Now. So,
oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, they announced this. It's a hey guys, we're bringing not like our games are on Steam and whatever, but PC Game Pass games are coming to GeForce Now, so that if you have like you can if you have both services, bada bing, bada boom. And I'm like, isn't that? And guess what, Chris? GeForce Now runs on Xbox. And it can actually output in 120 frames a second.
The 3080 might be my last graphics card for a long time, because when I got it, it was top of the world. But my brother's on like a 10-year-old graphics card because he runs GeForce Now.
Yeah.
And so when the 3080, when you guys are all running 62 580s or whatever, I'll still be running a 3080 because I will be using GeForce Now.
Right.
Congrats to everybody that, like me, is locked into a Founders rate. The GeForce Now is.
Oh, dude, I am locked in on that rate.
I thought about shutting it off last year when I was filing taxes.
Yeah. I was like, how do I
looking at my monthly expenses?
Can I put a secondary payment method just in case for some reason? Like
you $1 a year to hold this rate and not get service. Like, because I was like, I didn't use it very well in the last 12 months, and so I thought about disabling it. But then I was like, if I come back, like that Founders rate's cheap.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's and I actually did the upgrade Founders Ultimate Edition, so I'm running a 4090. And then that it actually runs all my games in 120 frames a second in ultra wide. And somebody was like, why would you even do that? It's like, why would I want to put the pressure and the heat on my computer? Heat is one of the Yeah, well, especially when it was like heat is the one of the biggest like detriments to your hardware, because just like the roads that you drive on, cold and heat like has this flex. And so that's why you see PCs that aren't made of like high quality materials degrade faster. Someone's like, oh, I got this computer for $400, and then the next year they're like, oh, I need a new computer. It's like, yeah, because it gets hot, it gets cold, and everything starts to struggle and take more time. So that's a natural kind of slowdown. So that's where it's like, yeah, every opportunity, especially when I'm streaming, I can have my computer just handle the stream, and then I can have whatever service I'm using, whether it's Shadow or it's GeForce Now, literally handle the game. And it's like I can run like games, just in such great quality, and then I have a great time with the stream. That's actually one of the things that is always kind of unique now, is that whenever I'm running a local game, I see so much more like resources obviously being pinged on the system. I was playing Blue Protocol because it launched in Japan. I'm loving it. I'm having a great time, but the whole time I'm like, oh my gosh, are they going to catch me? Like, are they going to see me? Are they going to ban my account? And so, I'm like, I know that Blue Protocol, when it launches globally, will be also on console, will also be, supported on GeForce Now, because it's going to have Steam. And so far, Amazon's been supporting all the games through GeForce Now. And I wonder if they'll also support Luma. So honestly, like when it comes down to the games, there wasn't any announcement, because like everything that they've announced, we haven't seen Perfect Dark yet. We haven't, like, from the Xbox showcase in and of itself, I was like, oh, this is okay. This is cool. Starfield is something that I'm very actually looking forward to stepping in. And we know it's Bethesda. We know that somebody said that, oh, but they're actually going to be able to hit 30 frames a second as a Bethesda game. Like, wow, like that's a huge improvement.
Yeah,
for
that's their
them.
max, not their
Yeah.
guarantee.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, if they're going to have that locked in. But in terms of like the gameplay and the exploration and the proceduralness of it, like it just seems like it could be a really fun game to kind of get lost in and explore and just kind of experience. And so I was like, yeah, I've always been interested in it, but now I'm actually like from a gameplay and story and everything perspective, I think just like I'm sitting down to play Final Fantasy 16 next week, through and through, like Julie's giving me that for Father's Day, like just go play your game, have fun. I'll, like you just live in it. Just like that, I think that also look forward to Starfield in that same way. And now I just need to figure out, because like after I play through 16, I want to play through 7R, and see, and especially kind of have the differences and what I ultimately feel is where I kind of go with it. So yeah, it's I think it's really good. I can't really think of any mic drop moment, and I think that's probably where, when we talk about some of the bitterness and we talk about some of that within the like gaming communities, I think a lot of it ends up being like, how much is like people who are just in the know, like you and me, like we're reading articles, we're researching, we're discussing it offline. And then, oh, it turns out they make the announcement, because we knew they were going to make the Throne and Liberty announcement. We knew like there wasn't anything
I
like,
hadn't been following
what?
Path of Exile, and so the Path of
Okay.
Exile community knew Path of Exile 2 was coming, and now that's confirmed. And so for a lot of us that maybe hadn't been following it, that was like, oh, I should be looking in on that. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely good to kind of catch us up, even if you are in the know on like one corner of gaming. Gaming's a big space, and as much as we think of it as like Final Fantasy players or World of Warcraft players or Gears of War players or Forza players, I think the vast majority of gamers play more than one game in a calendar year, which means that you're part of multiple communities, but you're not part of all the communities. So even if you know 5 or 6 games backward and forward, you check their press site every day, there's still 5 others that you would maybe play next year that you're not aware of. So like, it's still a good season for just kind of reminders and projects that maybe you heard about a year ago, but you're like, man, who knows? Like some of those projects spread out over years from when they're first revealed of a trailer or a name, or you hear that so-and-so's going there. So it's still a really good season of just like a lot of people talking about the games that excite them.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I remember the drama a while back that like Persona would never come to Xbox. And I did go search Twitter for that phrase and like found some of those tweets. And I was like, okay. Because then I started to wonder, were they real? Because then there were all these people like, oh, I never said that. Nobody ever said that. Not a single person
whoever
ever said that.
Possibly this.
Like,
what? Yeah.
Okay. They did exist. There were people who were very proud that Persona was never coming to Xbox, who now are like, of course it's coming to Xbox. And it's like, very cool. They weren't like major. It wasn't like IGN said it. And then like, as a result of the season, it also showed me kind of where I want to be putting my attention moving forward, because I think it's such a great time in gaming that if people aren't just genuinely excited about the games that are coming up, it doesn't really seem like a time where a lot of bitterness is valid. And so, for example, to pick on somebody that's easy for everybody to pick on, Kotaku put out an article, I think like a week or 2 ago. I want to say the most recent issue is they said there weren't enough like female protagonists or something in games. And then it resulted in this whole thread of everybody naming like female protagonists from like Mrs. Pac-Man forward. And they like implied that, I don't know, something about their implication. If I remember correctly, it was something about their implication was like that Forspoken was like the first time people have ever tried to have a female protagonist. And that's why people were angry. It's like,
no,
just a reminder of like, I keep trying to push Kotaku out of my mind.
Yeah,
this season just tells me it's like, no, and they're done. They're done. And I don't want to respond to their tweets. And this is already more engagement than I want to give them. I just want to be done. I just want to block anything with Kotaku. And I wish that Twitter would somehow be good enough that like, if you retweet Kotaku, I don't want to see that either. I want it all gone.
You can mute phrases and things like that.
So and so I just want it gone, because they're literally just not even worth the base fundamental attention at this point. Because it's been an entire year of nothing but incredible news. Even if there's a company you don't want to support, right? Blizzard's had a lot of reasons not to support them over recent years. And I understand and respect that decision. You can still, even at a distance, say, but I don't hate people that are saying they're enjoying Diablo 4. I don't hate people that say Dragonflight's a step in the right direction. I don't hate people that say, hey, I took a job at Blizzard and I'm actually really impressed with how much the culture and the salary and the things are going here. I have friends who have taken jobs there that had worked there in the past and are saying it's better than it's ever been before. I have friends that have continued to work there and they're saying it's better than ever before. Is it flawless? No. But like, we're in a season where there's enough good news that I think my takeaway wasn't any one game. It was that like there's no reason for me to spend my time hating on a game. And we've had those seasons where you do have just valid frustration. You know, when you talk about like changes in monetization or vaulting content or like a group of gamers being lied to or their accounts being deleted or anything like that, like there are very valid times to be upset. But I think the awards week and stuff was generally all good news. So I think it really just showed me like who I want to watch for the next year when we get to the end of the year and Twitch and YouTube or whatever, when we get all these reports that start to say like, where did you spend your time? I want to spend my time watching people that are just excited to play games because it's a great year to play games.
I think that's the ultimate like mic drop. Like when you look at, I literally just saw an article pop up and made me happy. It was like after the demo for Final Fantasy 16, this narrative of this game not being a Final Fantasy game, this narrative of that, like there's just been these kind of themes that pop up that like when you think about the concept of the social media and how these get hijacked, it could be just somebody who's just like, I'm going to put crap out in the world and see what happens. People react to it, discuss it, and it becomes like a part of the narrative. Some people like, oh, I do agree. I like this Final Fantasy 8 and we haven't seen anything. Like everybody's got their, their favorite kind of, part of the franchise. But what it ends up being is like, once you go hands on, like all of that goes away. And we see this happen a lot, especially with games. I saw it happen a lot with Blue Protocol. Someone said like, I'm so glad Blue Protocol doesn't have any drama in it. I'm like, oh, you just wait. Like every community will end up having that, but it always looks different per community. And I was like, we've already had 2 rounds of it. We had the let's try to convince Brian that this game is canceled round, which like when you talk about people going back and deleting things, I was like, here's it in the video. Oh, here they deleted that statement of this game is canceled and Bandai Namco is a bunch of cowards. It's like, well, at least they went back and said, you know what, I'm just going to delete that off my history. But it's always fun that I have that stuff in video form. And then the other one was just the censorship aspect. It's like we all have these different rounds, and a lot of that comes out of not being able to play the game, not being able to go hands-on with the game, living in the world of expectation and theory, and then adapting that thought that somebody has and making that like an actual fact. Oh, did you hear that yoshi-p hates Final Fantasy and that's why it's an action combat system? Oh, it makes complete sense. And then you're like, oh, I actually played it. It's a really great game. And then that whole part of the community just gets quiet because the evidence is over here. It's like the work speaks for itself. And so that's where it's like, yeah, okay, people are just talking right now. There's going to be a lot of quiet people on June 22nd. There's going to be a lot of quiet people when they, when you're experiencing like the game.
I'm only seeing positivity everywhere I'm looking. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody saying anything negative.
That's all I like. I've been curating my feeds because it's also very curated. So if you engage with the negative,
console wars has been all the negative for me.
Yeah.
Console wars. Occasionally there's, a moment about a creator or something like that. There's been some weird like creator clashing going on right now. But that honestly just feels like because there's nothing better to talk about. Like it's because we're waiting for the good games to release.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, I feel like we've gotten a lot of good games this year already. Back to the point, like people dogging on Forspoken. Like if you played it and you're like, that wasn't for me, I respect the hell out of it. You don't have to like it. But I'm like, yeah, like outside of the value proposition for the money, I've really enjoyed that experience. And it's going to be, I would say though, Forspoken is a vastly sharply contrast experience to that of 16. Like you can feel immediately like the tone, the difference, the characters, and so it's like, yeah. And the funny thing will be, and people will talk about it, is that Forspoken came out as a $70 game and 16 came out as a $70 game. One of those is really a $70 game. It's like maybe even more for some cases. So like it's hard because people make these false equivalencies between these different things. But yeah, like this year alone, I've been enjoying like every moment that I get to game. And I think that's the thing. It's that if you're not having fun playing the game that you're playing, you need to go find something fun to play, because that's ideally what this is about. And maybe to a degree, maybe that is some people's game, complaining on the internet. Like maybe that's the game that they have fun, is to see how many tweets or retweets or whatever they can get, or what kind of content or frustration they can vent out. I don't know. Some people play that game.
I can't balance. I want to get some 14 stuff done because the patches have been pretty on point lately. And 6.4 is massive, and I want to get back into Dragonflight, and
Mm-hmm.
Guild Wars had some stuff going on, and New World's on the horizon, but like I'm spending a ton of time with Diablo 4 because it's new, and that means that like Tears of the Kingdom's behind, and so like it's actually the bigger issues when I want to sit down and watch TV or a movie. Like those have been mediums that for me have not been keeping up.
Yeah.
And so like I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna go play another game. Gaming's way better right now.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's amazing.
Way better. So it's been a good time to be a gamer. For Warhammer 40K fans, congrats on the week. Hopefully there's some good news and nuggets in there as the rules all slide slowly out this week.
Yeah.
It's been an exciting week. It's roughly every 3 years we go into a new edition. So exciting time to be model building and rolling some dice. Yeah.
That's I want to bring up what Fluffy here says. Bring back Fluffy Dog says, planning leave for Final Fantasy 16 is not the worst idea. Maybe I should follow suit. And I tell you, the hardest thing about it, because I don't have any PTO because we had the baby and I used it all there. The hardest thing will be on the 22nd when I go to work and then the game is out and playable. Thankfully, I get to play that afternoon, evening, and then Friday afternoon, evening as well. And I was talking to a couple of my coworkers about it, and they're like, oh yeah, like, yeah, not feeling so good today. You can take a sick day. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be real awkward when they're like, oh, Brian called in sick and he's live streaming Final Fantasy 16. I was like, I don't get to play that card. I don't get to play that card because I want to have that record again. Like I really enjoyed that I have that record of Endwalker and finishing this like epic. And I wish I had the record for every kind of part of that expansion, like as an archive to go back on and look back on at some point in the future. But I that's what I was like, I want for 16. And that's actually what I'm doing also for Final Fantasy 4. Like hell, the Pixel remasters alone, Chris, like if you haven't ever got a chance to go and pick that up, like that, even on Switch, like when you're just like in the airport, like it's a great experience because you can boost up your experience gain per fight to 4. So it really just cuts down the grind and you're just kind of enjoying the story and kind of playing through it very kind of casually. And it's very enjoyable. I really am quite pleased with that. And honestly,
maybe on the way to FanFest.
Yeah, maybe on the way to FanFest, that'd be a really good thing to pick up. But the thing that I've also like appreciate about that is that I hear people who want to see Final Fantasy kind of come back to its roots. We saw that with 9, and 9's beloved, and we're hearing about a remake rumors for 9. But on that note, I'd be fine if they decided to make another, like they took the Pixel remasters and you almost kind of have these different avenues for Final Fantasy. Like you have that kind of style, like they make a whole new game, 2D, like that sprite based Pixel remaster. How often do you think they could come out with a Final Fantasy kind of in that kind of style? And I would venture to bet roughly every couple of years. And imagine if all of a sudden you have like these different kind of styles, right? You have the 7 remake style, the 16 style
was coming back in like 2026.
Yeah. Well, for its 25th anniversary. Yeah.
I have struggled to not replay that game over the last couple of years because I went back and played some of the games in my childhood that were like B tier, A tier.
Yeah.
Right. And some of them didn't hold up. And so like I've been afraid to go back and touch my S tier games when it was on Game Pass for a bit. And I downloaded it and did not play it because I'm like, what if it doesn't hold up? Like, what if so much of what Final Fantasy X in my head is the greatest game of all time, tied with Ocarina of Time? What if those two games, what if I went back and played them and they don't hold the same place? The soundtrack should be, I assume the soundtrack I would have been off my Walkman and probably on burned CDs that could hold maybe 8 to 10 tracks, and ran out of batteries every 2.5 hours. I assume that's about it. And so I'd have to go back and find my CDs because the soundtrack would have been whatever top 40 was in the late 90s or whenever that was. That would have been probably pre-Napster too, so it's probably only 1 or 2 artists because I probably didn't have enough. I probably didn't have enough discs. It's probably Jock Jams, Jock Rock, roller skating music.
Now that's what I call music. 1940, like 93. Woo!
Yeah. Now hits 4. So, I don't know. I just wonder if it wouldn't hold up. So I'm excited. Maybe a remaster is a good way to like bring that back in and say like, they're going to bring it up to 4K. They're going to bring it up to, And they're going to
kind
spin it
of
for
right.
a more adult artist, more adult audience. So they're going to spin it
Right.
like if it ends up being like
No.
7 is taking on concepts that I wouldn't have been ready to take on when it released the first time.
See, that's what I'm actually really enjoying about. So I played and streamed some Final Fantasy IV because that for me was the Final Fantasy that I fell in love with. Right, like I originally played one, I didn't like one, and I got Dragon Warrior as a part of my Nintendo Power, and I was like, dude, Dragon Warrior, aka Dragon Quest. This is like, oh, this is so good. And so I was really down that avenue. And then Super Nintendo comes out, Final Fantasy 2. Brian, you got to try it. Brian, you got to try it. And I was like, I played it and I was like, this is amazing. Holy smokes. I love this experience. So I'm playing through it already. And I've only touched the opening. I got through, all the way out to the desert and, picked up, like I can't even remember names right now, despite it. Like if as I'm playing it, I literally so far been like, oh, I remember there's a treasure chest over here. I haven't touched this game in 30 years, but that's the impact that it's had on me. But going into it, it's like, oh, I talked to Kane right at the beginning. And he kind of alludes that like his father died and his father was a dragoon, and that's what made him sign up to be a dragoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did not resonate with that. I didn't even remember that. But as a parent, I can tell you hands down, like that was actually a really powerful line in a Super Nintendo Final Fantasy game. I was like, holy crap. And that's one of the things that I'm like, I want to go back and experience all of this, like as an adult, as a parent, as somebody who's now got life experience, as opposed to when I saw it, like as a kid who didn't know that the word bastard was considered like a bad word. I heard it in Ghostbusters. And so I'm fighting Zemos and I'm like, you bastard. And my friend looks at me like I just dropped an F-bomb because that was probably like the worst thing we could have said at the time. And I didn't know. It's just like I heard it from the movie. And so there's this experience and this life experience that I have. So it's been I think 31 years since I played Final Fantasy, 4, aka 2. And so I was like, yeah. So I've already had a moment in it that I'm wanting to go back and enjoy. And that kind of says like everything that we have and experience, I'm generally curious and would fully support them doing these things, because the question to you here in this case, you haven't played 16 yet, but where does Final Fantasy as a series go from here? Do we see that they end up just saying these games are M rated? These games are, we're going to tell like these stories, or do you think that, like if they tried to say, hey, the next one is going to be rated T for teen and we're going to kind of tone it down and make it, like how do you follow up something like Final Fantasy 16?
If we've learned anything from what yoshi-p has shared about his development philosophy, just kind of the theme behind what he believes, his goal is to separate the art at the development phase from don't worry about Metacritic, don't worry about rating, don't worry about price. Let's build a great story. Let's build a world we want to be in. And then once that's there, let's encapsulate that in our little tome of canon. And we'll keep that on a pedestal. And a portion of the team will be these warrior priests who are going to defend this canon Bible. And we're going to just stick to that. And then we're going to let all the demons in. We're going to let in monetization and marketing and ratings boards and all these things that do have to exist as part of game development. But they are not allowed to affect what's inside the tome. They're not allowed to. And so like, I think write the story you want to write. And if that needs to be M rated, it needs to be M rated. Mm-hmm. I think that T for Teen serves a lot of what they were able to do in ARR, but as they wanted to go a little deeper, yoshi-p found that rating has kind of been restrictive, but it's not restricted because it restricted them at the beginning necessarily. I think they did a lot with ARR. It's restrictive in that like they're stuck with the same rating 10 years later. But with single player titles, you're not. You can get it right the first time. So if it can be T for Teen, it can be T for Teen. If it has to be M, it has to be M. And I think just leave that where it needs to be. So like, I think that really comes through. It's one of the reasons I think it's weird that 16 is console exclusive, because so much about his philosophy is about delivering a great game to everybody that can experience it. And so like, that's the only part of 16 that is not just a manifestation of what yoshi-p has been saying. And he's not the only person on the team. He's not the only person driving that boat, but everything that I'm hearing about 16 is a living action-based example on the stuff he says, because words don't weigh that much, but his actions do. And like his actions, 16 seems like it's a love letter to all the things about game development that he wishes were going on in single player RPGs, except when he says games should be available to everybody that can. And so the fact that it is not like in like the most literal example of that in my mind would be that they negotiated terms and it was in Game Pass and PlayStation Plus day one, that it's in subscription services, that it's, allowed on GeForce Now, and that's something that they optimized for. And like, that's all day one. That's the only part of what he said when I hear him talk about game development and what it means to be a game developer and who games are for. And the M for mature, that's not out of line, because the story he wanted to tell couldn't be told with T for Teen. He didn't make it M and then say, okay, now write me an M story. He said, this is a story I want to tell.
Yeah.
And
this is where it falls in
with M.
Yeah.
Oh, without M. So like, I would say, where does Final Fantasy go from here? Keep hiring great writers to write great stories and then build great games around them.
Well, and empower the team to do these things. And I think a lot of that, like when it comes down to it, yeah, because Veltus is saying like, rather it be a single platform than an unoptimized mess. Like you can hit multi-platform and not have it be an optimized mess. I don't buy into that connection that couldn't have been pushed out to PC at the same time. But would it have cost more money? Would it have been different? Yeah, I think they actually would have. I think Square Enix got a huge check. And at the end of the day, like, I get the business side of it. And if that helped Square Enix approve, because like we'll never know the details, but if that helped Square Enix say yoshi-p, yeah, you got another, sure, take another year, we have this locked down, make the game you want to make, empower your team to be it. And yes, it will eventually trickle out. I would be all for it. And as soon as this game comes to PC, like I'm gonna like they've already sold 2 copies. Like I got the PS5 version. I'm gonna get the PC version because I also want to experience it in ultra wide. Like
Octopath Traveler was built for Switch and later went on to Xbox. And so if that's its life cycle, you can come back and clip this and say, hey, with new information, does your opinion change? And I'll say, yes, absolutely, my opinion changes. I don't take back what I said just now, but I am saying with new information. So if it's purely an optimization question and a quality of product, then that's fine. But that means that it comes out of exclusivity at the fastest possible rate. And there are statements he's made that imply that may be the case, but none of them are so firm that we know.
The thing I do appreciate
because
about him,
they wouldn't like that.
Well, no,
people who favor exclusive do not want you going and you can set your watches. It'll drop out of exclusivity on this date because then a lot of us are like, great, then I'll wait. No, so
and they're paying
the hidden nature is what they're paying for.
A part of that also is marketing too, but you're right because it's not like so Yoshi. But the thing I do appreciate about Yoshi-p talking about the PC version is that when it's ready, because if anybody here is a Square Enix fan and on PC, it is a hit or miss kind of environment. Like it literally is hit or miss. And that's where like I come back to like wanting them to support GeForce Now and doing these things that they aren't yet doing because that's essentially where I see myself as a gamer being able to take advantage way easier of just like, give me it in the cloud. And for the parents out there, they understand.
Not only in the cloud, because that is geographically very restrictive.
Right.
There are those
but as an option
somewhere that has good internet, that's a great option.
Right. And all the parents that have the good internet, like generally speaking, they're like, I'm tired of my, kids spilling like coffee into my, $3,000 PC and now it's toast. Like we've all I have been like
$300 Chromebook. Looked into GeForce Now.
We're good. Like, oh no. It I literally had a Logitech G Cloud. And one of my kids destroyed it. And I was like, all right, when I can afford it, I'm going to order another one because I like that device so much. But
it hasn't eaten lunch in months. They were just paying off that laptop.
They were working hard.
Missed lunch. I don't know what to tell you. Lunch is $5 a day.
We feed our children.
We feed our children.
Well, I'm just going to clarify. We take care of our children. I don't run a debt model with them. That sounds more child abuse than anything else, especially for an 8-year-old who it wasn't obviously but it just happens. Accidents happen. Things break. Discs break.
Absolutely.
Why do I like
my brothers and I broke probably 10 coffee tables.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like in all seriousness.
I found the dog chewing on my coffee table.
They're just gone.
And I was like, oh gosh. So anyway, my life is usually filled with lots of destruction that are just happening and I don't want to be a dad that yells. I don't want to be a dad that because they had the A6 or the awesome whatever this new handheld thing, and I was like, oh, it's a Windows PC handheld, and I look at it and it's like $700-800. I was like, hell no. I did splurge and get a Steam Deck, and that thing lives out they don't even know it exists. It's in this hidden pocket that only I have access to because not even my wife can get to it.
In an air-conditioned attic, sweating.
This is my hand.
It's so hot.
Leave my handheld alone.
Protect it.
Leave this alone, please. Don't break my stuff. Oh my gosh, yeah. And so they've broken a switch or two. They've broken that, and it's Brian, why do you like cloud gaming? because I like to be able to be around my kids, but then also not sweat that the thing that I'm using is going to like get completely destroyed. And then thankfully I live in a position where it's like, okay, you broke my, $250 handheld. I guess I'll go 6 months without it, and then I'll save up and I'll get another one. And I'm not like devastatedly angry, over a piece of hardware, unless like, if I walk in and they're hitting it with hammers, I think I'll lose I will probably get mad and be like, what are you doing? Why? What ran through your mind that was the right choice to do today, child?
Kids break things, man.
They do
a lot of stuff growing
right
up.
Yeah, so as a
lot of stuff. We broke
that's
a lot of stuff.
that's actually like one of the things where people like push back on like cloud gaming. I'm like, guys, you don't get it. It saves me so much money because I can have a really premier experience, and because I have the internet, and that's going to be how it is. So I think to answer my question about like where does Final Fantasy like go from here, I think it's all about in terms of assembling the team, and then you're right, like telling the stories and making the games that they're excited about, because you're going to get that passion buy-in as opposed to like this cookie cutter thing. And I stated, like, I'm so glad you called into mind the Metacritic score and the disconnection from yoshi-p. I think that a lot of these companies get analysis paralysis where, okay, if we're going to fund this game, we need to have this kind of return and this is what's to be expected. And what it ends up doing is I think it puts everybody in the sense of like, oh gosh, I can't take a risk, or I need to play it safe so we can be sure to hit this score so we can all get our bonus checks. And even if you're not front of mind, like these are things that just happen. You think about any incentive structure that's on you that you're like, well, I would have raised my hand and said like, that's a kind of a bad idea. But I know like everybody over here is like, shut up. This is the golden calf. Don't ruin it for everybody, and that kind of mindset. So it keeps people quiet in that regard.
A total disconnect from money. Like it's
no, but disconnecting the Metacritic
it's good
score.
That constraints are there, but you don't want it to be that the constraints are so strong you can't.
Well, disconnecting it from something out of their control,
so strong, right?
Disconnecting it from something that's out of their control. I heard this like phrase. It's like, okay, yeah, if you're talking to one-on-one, let's say I said something and I offended you, right? It's like, okay, I can apologize. I can come to an understanding. But let's say I wanted to talk to 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 100,000 people. Like those odds are extra, like they expand. And then all of a sudden it's like, if I have to start factoring all this in, like, okay, like it does have an impact. Maybe I choose my words differently. And then maybe I'm not saying anything important at all. Maybe at that point, it's just this watered down mess of where we all look at these things and it just feels cookie cutter. It just feels like, okay, they just copy paste. They didn't do anything, that truly meant anything, because you're always worried, like, how do you do that? And that's what I think when they disconnected the Metacritic score, the devs are like, cool, okay, I'm still going to get paid. Well, what do we want to do? And then it turns out they had the best Metacritic score in their like especially for an MMO ever. And so I think essentially you kind of see like, okay, well maybe we disconnect some of these things, but at the same time not like disreward, hurt people's financial well-being, from it. And so into that nature, I feel like yoshi-p has built the dream team, right? He assembled his team, and I want to see what they can do next, because for me, all I'm looking for is, will Final Fantasy 16 dethrone Final Fantasy Tactics and Chrono Trigger? I think it has the potential, and we haven't seen that happen in a while. I have a kid behind me, so I'm gonna let you jump in.
I think the hard part about everything that was just described is how do you identify what values can be messed with and what values need to be protected. And so far, yoshi-p's nailed that. But that's the hard part. That's why when I said back when we just knew that he was working on the title, we knew nothing else about it, I got a little concerned that people were saying this was going to be the greatest game of all time, because once the bar's set there, there's nowhere to go positive. It can only disappoint you, as opposed to saying,
it wasn't the greatest. Yeah.
And in that way, there's still room to be surprised and delighted. I hope it's a good game. And if it's better than that, I still have room to be pleasantly surprised. And if it ends up being something that's sub-optimized, or I end up having a negative experience somehow, I don't have to fall all the way from the heavens, Mount Olympus, and tumble all the way down to sea level. Like, I started a good game, and as long as maybe I got back to my $70, well, I don't feel so angry, as opposed to like, man, I took off work, I uninstalled every other game, I told all my friends to screw off, I smashed my Xbox with a hammer. And I did all this so that I could have the best Final Fantasy 16 experience. It's like, well, that seems a little much, because like we don't know. And so like this does start to ask, does yoshi-p and the others on the team do they have the right pulse on what the right things are to reproduce something like Shadowbringers or Endwalker? And I really hope so. We'll find out in a week. That'll be really exciting, because picking down those core values and then having people in leadership that recognize what those are and can protect those. Gore-Tech, the people that make like they make like suits for like firefighters, and they also make like the fancy jackets for like the winter, all sorts of different products with Gore-Tech. They have a company policy that a plant can't ever be more than 150 people. That is because they believe it protects their corporate culture, and there is sociology that backs that up and says that we can't have positive relationships with more than 150 people. It's just this magical line that when tribes get beyond that, and there are all sorts of like religious organizations over the years that used to split their church up when they get to 150 people. There's military organizations throughout the world with different countries that say that a particular troop of men can never go above 200. There is this magic line that keeps showing up over and over and over throughout history, that 150 people is kind of this break point for the way our brain works, and you have to start redefining the organizational structure. And so Gore-Tech just said, screw that. And if we want to have an additional plant within a particular area tied to, if they wanted to have 2 plants in Dallas, instead of having one plant with 300 employees, they would have a plant in Dallas and a plant in Fort Worth, each with 150 people. And if they need to add a third plant, they would just add a third plant in Grapevine with 150 people. They have some plants that can see each other because it protects their 150 people. So whatever yoshi-p's 150 people is, hopefully out of this, we also get some really interesting dev panels, so we can start to get a real feel for like, what are the core tenets that when he jumps from an MMO to a single player game, he goes, but that's my 150 people thing. Like, I don't break that line, and we just don't break it. And if we're going to break it, I'm not going to be part of the project, because that is core. And I think like a strong narrative element is part of that. And even as somebody that has not always enjoyed games for story, I can still respect that. Like, he has that one value, and he sticks to it.
Yeah. Now I want to highlight this comment from Solid 912. Says, part of me doesn't like the whole yoshi-p we trust. When it comes to 16, he's the producer. He's there to make sure deadlines are met. But a vision is all the director creative director duo.
Absolutely.
And I think, and I agree with this to an extent, with the kind of the caveat that one of the things that we see happen within development when a game comes out and does not deliver, you see a concept online, oh, lazy devs. And I go, no. I would first point you to leadership. And leadership is a critical role. It's a role in which that, yes, deadlines are being met, but you're not spending time wasting away doing a lot of rework. And we've seen that plague Square Enix specifically numerous times, where a game is announced and then 10 years later it comes out. Like, that game was restarted its development 3 times, most likely during that case, or maybe 2 times, especially in the 10-year.
Overwatch 2 just changed leadership over the last couple of years, and it completely changed the direction of the project. Not because the devs changed, not because the entire production team changed, but because the people at the top changed. That was the reason for the big shift in direction. So like, and he's the celebrity name that the 14 community knows.
Well, he's
There's
earned that
like
title, right?
It's the top billing in a movie,
Yeah.
right? They're not the only actor in the movie. They're not they're not the only person that makes that movie possible. They're the person that we reference. When you think the new Top Gun movie, you think Tom Cruise, but there were a lot of brilliant performances in that movie. So like, part of it is his name just has the recognition. It has the SEO rank. And part of it is because he is such a high level producer, and production in particular has been something that the industry has had trouble nailing down exactly what it looks like. Same with community management. Community management is something that like 14 continually wins awards for. Those community awards, that's not us. That's the community team, the people at Square Enix with their paychecks. So when the community pats themselves on the back, it's not you, it's the people managing it. It's your babysitters that are getting the award, and they work for it. And so that community team is something that, when we out on Twitter, you can see community managers all the time. They're very, very vocal. It's what their job is, about what it's like. That is a role that the gaming industry has not well defined, and every studio treats it a little bit different. Some studios just let any responsibility that they don't know what it is just fall on the community team. Others think that community teams aren't even really valuable, and so the first time they get to layoffs, they just let that team go blindly. It is not a well-defined role. And so I would argue that if you are trying to get into a game that's going to have a big community element to it, the same way we're looking at production here, because production is such a big part of a single player RPG coming out at quality and coming out on time and being an incredible product. I would argue that if we were talking about an MMO, what are we doing within the community team? Because the community team has just been an ill-defined part of the space, and it can make the difference between a good game and a great game.
Yeah. And like I see chat and Mitchell, talking about like his job also to empower the team to free them up, to be creative. And I think Yoshi P, we've seen that. And that's one of the things. Now, what's interesting, because like when we talk about him as a celebrity name, like that's coming from the Final Fantasy 14 world,
Absolutely.
where those who have not played and will not play because they're like, oh, I don't want an MMO, I want a single player game. Like, as you see, I've seen lots of lists coming out where Final Fantasy 11 and 14 is completely excluded off of those
Right.
lists outright. And it's like, oh, come on. Like, like just, it's got an amazing free trial. And we've talked about ways of opening the game up itself with, like there's all kinds of things that I'd like to see what they kind of, what they would experiment with, especially like in 11's case, like what do they do in offline mode? Do they just reimagine it as a single player story? Who knows? I'd be game for any of that. But when it comes to Yoshi P and his team, yeah, like I think this is also a good opportunity for him to show up. And that's where, like, again, the article's talking about like, yeah, okay, hey guys, you know what? We've shown you stuff. We've done the trailers. Why don't you go play it? You go play it. You know what? And if you don't like it, no worries. And it's like so many people, like I've seen, oh, I didn't think I was going to like this game. I was wrong. Like I've seen so many people going like, oh, okay. Yeah, that rhetoric, zip, like, whoa, okay, there's something different here. And ultimately, I guess it'll be interesting to see where this game falls and how people receive it. And just like, that's something that I'm very grateful to this community for allowing me the opportunity to sit down and play Final Fantasy 16, because I stated it like we were talking like podcasts ago. It's like, I think the real testament of Yoshi P's real leadership and his change will be felt with Final Fantasy 16. And we didn't know he was the producer of it at that time. And I was like, and so this is where it's like, was that a correct prediction? Was that a correct feeling so many years ago? And is that mindset rewarded? And we'll find out here soon enough. But I do know you need to get to the airport. So is there any final thoughts you want to say before we wrap up today's podcast?
No, next week I don't know if we'll have a show because I've been training, so that one kind of takes up the whole week. But that's just kind of a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be, and they have they actually have like one of those motivational speakers coming in to give a training that week. So 2 of the days are long because I'm going to go have lunch provided and listen to some guy tell me about how the inner awesome was in me all along. Those are they're fun. They get you jazzed up. The question is, how do you convert them from motivation into drive? Because motivation is fleeting. And so be a nice first week to come in and rah and be excited. And then, so by the time I come back, people will be telling me that 16 has changed their life and they can't type with all the letters because the crying ruined part of their keyboard that they cried on while playing PlayStation. And the room was so filled with tears, it actually damaged their computer. And so hopefully you guys have had a great time. It's a great time to be a gamer.
And Souls, like for those of you who like popped in at some point during the stream itself, this is over on the YouTube, so you'll be able to see it as soon as we hit and broadcast. So that will be archived, and we'll let you guys know when the next scheduled podcast is scheduled. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We will have to figure out what we do because I will be playing 16 starting Thursday. So I could be just kind of like, we went dark podcast wise for a little bit, and then we come back and we talk about the reality of 16. So thanks guys so much for joining us. I'm gonna let Chris hit the road and get out of here. So I'm gonna hit end broadcast and just wave it out. Love you guys. And we'll see you when we see